Okay, hello and welcome to today's event. This is the final event in our Spring 2015 CRM webcast series. As we're now out of the spring, which is a good time to be wrapping this series up. But today I am really excited to be joined by Sandor Schellenberg, a dynamic CRM consultant and integration expert. Sandor has presented for our audience on numerous different times in the past, and we're always happy to have him back again. Today he'll be exploring the basics of dynamic CRM and ERP integration success. Before we get started, I would just like to recognize our CRM series sponsors and thank them for their support of msdynamicsworld.com. They are Marketo, PowerObjects, and Scribe Software. And one other note for anyone who is thinking about CRM-focused issues, especially along the lines of project management, we have another great series ready to start later in July that I just wanted to bring your attention to. It's all about planning for CRM success, everything from understanding some of the CRM basic concepts up through planning and user adoption. So really for anyone who is thinking about some of those issues, whether it's a new implementation, or whether it is planning an upgrade or just some improvements to your CRM system, really worth a look. It's hosted by one of the Microsoft MVPs for Dynamic CRM, Rick McCutcheon, and really hope to see you there. We're excited about it. So for today's event, we do want to keep today's session very interactive. We welcome you to enter your questions into the Q&A block that you should see to the right of the slides. And without any further delay, I'm going to hand things over to our speaker, Sandor Schellenberg.
Okay, thank you, Jason. Welcome all to the event. Let me see my slide deck. Today we're going to talk about dynamic CRM and ERP integration and what mostly should lead to successful integration. I did previous presentation about integration and CRM topics. They were more theoretical, and today it's a bit of I try to make it a more practical approach. So what we're going to discuss, of course, a little bit introduction, the basic outlines of an integration project, so gathering requirements, choose your software. At the end, we have the real-life example, the build, production, and I try to cover all topics you will face around the integration project. What Jason already pointed out, if you have questions, yeah, please ask away. So first, there's also a lot of discussion about integration, that how it works, and still in many projects, if you're implementing CRM or EP system, integration is always a bit underestimated. I think, oh, it's just clicking here and clicking there and connecting a little bit, but as you working with integration, you might see that it's very similar to running a real project. So we have the gathering of requirements, we have another like a functional design, a technical design, and all the steps which are similar to a regular implementation of either CRM or any ERP system. So normally you start with the functional design, which can contain all the requirements about your source. In a simple scenario, it's just one source. In a more difficult, it can be multiple, and the target. In our example, we have CRM as source and an ERP system, just random. It could be SAP or NAV or GP or Salomon or whatever you use. With old legacy system that's still around. And the next step is that we have to analyze the data. So you start with a data model, define your entities from the source, the target, and start with a high-level mapping. So that's basically the most things you do in a functional requirement phase. The next step is, of course, the technical requirements, so that you have topics like infrastructure, security requirements, especially nowadays. It's it could be very complex, but some companies are very strict in firewall settings and people who can reach their system and classify the confidential data. So the other challenge is, of course, is that a lot of things are now in the cloud. So you could have a cloud-based integration that's fully cloud-based or a hybrid. So you have a connection from an on-premise to a cloud system. Or, yeah, of course, we still have the on-premise versions. Further, what you have to decide in the technical requirements is if you make a point-to-point integration of a loosely coupled, which I will discuss later. Of course, the next step is choose your software. From a CRM perspective, we have multiple choices. So at the lowest level, you have the Microsoft Dynamics connector, which you could use for a simple and not too difficult integration. You have the SSIS, which is part of a SQL Server that's also nowadays often used. Of course, we can have a custom integration that is built with either a C# or other tool, Java or whatever you would like to use. Scribe software, and of course that's maybe known to a lot of people. It's a common tool to use. And in the more enterprise, you would also have systems with an ESB, like TIBCO or BizTalk. So it really depends on your situation. If it's a small enterprise, is it a medium size or a very international company? So which software you can choose, or depends on budget and of course time and efforts. Now today we have an example that's based with Scribe software because I tend myself to use Scribe software in several occasions, and I have a CRM system, CRM 2015, and I have created a very simple SQL-based ERP system, which will be I try to demonstrate at the end of the presentation. If you start with an integration, of course, we start with the design. So we design with an integration flow. Now the common standard ERP scenario is that, of course, we have accounts and contacts. In ERP, it is not always split in account and contact, but it can be in the customer. Of course, we have invoices. That's usually a one-way. So you can have it from a CRM perspective, you can have an invoice into your ERP system, or you could have all the data you need for creating an invoice into your ERP system. And usually it's a one-way. So you create your invoice, or at least the data you need for your invoice is CRM, and the integration will pick it up and send it to your ERP system. Now part of your invoice is of course the product and prices. Now that's usually coming from the ERP itself because it can be very complex. So the price calculations is could be very difficult. We have special rules and quantities, and your ERP system is better equipped, mostly better equipped for the difficult pricing and maintaining your product catalog. Of course, in ERP, what you also have with products, that it can be connected to your warehouse, where also the stock and is registered. So how many you still have in-house? Do you need extra order with your supplier or not? So it depends. I have seen a few examples where products are maintained in CRM, but then it's mostly very straightforward and simple. Payments, that's always a very interesting requirement, which you usually have in ERP. So if you have your invoice generated from CRM and sent it to your ERP system, you want to have your CRM users also see if a payment did come in, if they go to the customer, if all the invoices are paid, or that they are behind in payment. So that could be a very useful information. Further, we often have some system fields like cost centers and cost units. So that's really in the area of finance. So that's always will reside in your ERP system. So if you were working with NFV or AX, it might be for exact. So it should be very familiar. So the next step, so if we have to make the basic design, so then we can choose on how we're going to make the integration. Now, my previous presentation, I have a lot of discussed it, so I will mention it shortly. We have the point-to-point, so that's basically from one system A directly connected to one system B. So in my integration, I usually use it only for status updates or for the return or primary keys. So for example, if you create an account in your CRM system, you send it to your ERP, then the ERP system is generating an account number or another number, and that will be, you want to have that also registered in your CRM system. So that would be a very useful approach for point-to-point. We have loosely coupled. So then we have the publisher-subscriber principle. So we have one source is publishing events. So it can be event of a new contact is created or a new invoice is created. And your subscriber picks up the message and process it in the target system. And the third option is a batch. So that can be useful for, you could think of payments, because mostly you don't need payments straight away, so it can be a nightly batch that processes all the payments coming in from the invoices. And that can be also a very interesting integration if you have a lot of data that's pretty static and not needed real time. So then the batch process can be very interesting to use. Now, a basic integration flow, I will start with Visio, and here you see a very simple integration flow. So on your left side, you will see account and contacts, and that will be sent to your ERP system. It could either be straight to the same entities, so to our account and contact, so that's are living in your ERP site. But depending on the type of software, it could also be in a container entity called customer, and the customer contains account, address information, and contacts. Now you see also a line coming back from the right side to the left side. So the right side is of course your ERP system, and for your integration you will send back, for example, your ERP number in case you create a new customer. Now, of course, this is very simple. You can also think of a more complex situation where if you have a new customer, it will be like a prospect, and it only gets a custom number if it did really have to make an order or it have an order history. So then you can extend your integration that in the first time you make a new customer, you get the EP number, and the second, it could be a debtor number or a creditor number. It's very important to think about this because this is also your key to make the integration work. So this on the numbers you can also see that the account already is available in ERP. So for the next time you don't use to get the number, but maybe you don't have can use an update of either account of contact. And that could be one way. So some clients decide, okay, if my account is living in ERP, then only ERP is allowed to make changes to it, because some of the fields could be your invoices addresses, and that's a part of your invoice process. And of course, it can be a lot of money involved. So if you change your invoice address in CRM, and it might happen that your invoices are sent to the wrong customer, to the wrong address. So that's something you have to think about. And second part, of course, what you often see is the invoice. If you're familiar with CRM, you know that invoice is an entity that exists of basically two entities. You have the invoice, the header lines, and the invoice lines. So you have one header with several, which can contain several products. In ERP, it's usually also work the same way. So you can have your integration have one header with multiple invoice details. Now, after invoice is arrived in ERP, it's usually an ERP process that will be started, that will process the invoice, book it, and of course at some time, usually if you're lucky after 30 days, then payment will come in. The payment will be processed, and that will be also triggered to send back to your CRM system, and you can say, okay, this invoice has been paid. Now, if we have the processes and we know basically what we have to integrate on a high level, then we go a step deeper. So then we go into the definition of business logic and data mappings. Now what you do, especially of course if you use Scribe, but it can also be another system, that you have to define your source and targets, choose your entities. Now your entities, your flow you have designed already, and then you can start making your basic data mappings. Yeah, that's of course then in the next phase is the building. So after the design phase, we have the build phase. It's similar to another another project. And in the demo, I made some basic account contact customer exchange. Now for data mappings, we can define basically two kinds. We have, of course, what we prefer is a one-to-one mapping. So we have one field that maps to another field, like an account number. But of course, life is not that simple. So the other translations that we have, of course, are piglets. So we can use file lookups or DB lookups. And to get a bit more in detail, a file lookup is just a text file lookup, which is normally very quick. And a DB lookup is either a lookup in SQL Server or in CRM, and then you have to pass the web services, so that would be a little bit slower. We were sorry, we're talking about data mappings. And here I have show you an example of data mapping you can do in Scribe. So on your left side you see the source. Now in this example it's an XML source. And at your right side you see the target. And just below you can see some basic mappings. So basically what states here is that field S19, which you just cannot see it, is mapped to the status field, and the other one, S14, is set to the delivery conditions. And if we have the next phase, then we can look a bit lower to the mappings. So everything that simply says source, and then at the end you see the same source, that's a one-of-one mapping. If we go to row 15, you see price valid from, then you see that here is some string manipulation. And in this case, it was due to the fact that dates were stored as a numeric value, so not a date. So through data manipulation, string manipulation, we just cut it up. So the first part will be would be the month, and the second part a day, and the third part, I think so. It's the third part of the year, and then the month, and then the day. In the red, you see an example of a DB lookup, and here value based on the source value is looked in the opportunity entity, and it will return a link to your opportunity. So if you already maybe saw it, it is an example of a quote, and a quote has a relation to your opportunity. So here did we make a relation. Just below the red lines, you will see a file lookup, and here we use the file to choose the right value of a pick list. So we have several ways to do it, but from CRM perspective, an option set of a pick list is a bit strange entity. So it's not a field, and it is stored. It could be stored in several tables, and this is an easy way to map your pick list. So behind here, it's just a simple text file which says, okay, if this my source is like new customer, and then the pick list value would be a numeric value that's which you can look up in CRM. So we have started with the process, and then we start with building the data mappings and a bit of business logic. So the next part is to make it integrate. An example that I used, I made a loosely coupled integration. So what happens is that I have a publisher, and the publisher is defined and configured, and it will be triggered on either an account creation, or it could be an update or a status change. At the moment that happens, the publisher will pick up the event and translate it to XML. And the XML will, in the next step, will be forwarded to a message queue. So that's the function of a publisher. Now, publishers are used in several environments. So Scribe uses publishers, but for example, if you maybe did work with Salesforce, Salesforce also has its own publisher, and Salesforce can publish XML messages also on the same principle. So in case something did change, it can push as an XML message. Now the next part is the integration process. The integration processes are listening in the message queue. So at the moment a message with a certain label is arrived. The integration process sees the message come in, checks the label, says okay, this is for me, and it will pick it up, and then it will be processed to your target system. From a Scribe perspective, integration processes can be triggered from either SQL, it could be based on message queue integration, it could be time-based. So you have a lot of choices that you can make. So you can either make it a batch process, a time-based process. It could either be also a file process. So if a new file is arrived in a directory, it can be triggered. And in this case, we configured it for message queuing. I hope that's readable. This is the high-level integration design. So on your left side, in nice bright yellow, you will see the source. Now in the middle is your Scribe software. It could also be in ASB or BizTalk or TIPCO in this case. And on your right side you have the target. Now in the upper left corner you see a source. You see a line that says CRM pub. So the publisher will take changes from the source, publish it in a message queue, and from that the integration process picks it up from the message queue and to either a connection. In this example here, it's an ODBC, it will update the target. Now, if you go one step lower, you see that the source is query-based, so one query will be run so that you can compare it with a SQL query. So at the moment you get the results, it will be triggered, and then it will be processing all your query results. So at the same is the lower, it can also work with a query. So based on a query, you can either do in CRM or in ERP. They'll publish a message to the message queue, integration process, picks it up. In this example, the CRM adapter is used, and the message will be sent to your CRM system. Now, what's an XML message look like? I have here a small example. This is an XML message created by a publisher. So I hope, I'm not sure if it's readable, but basically the first part says, the first text says when it's published. And in the third line you see message label. And the message label, that's a meta entity of an XML message. In this case used for the message queue. And the nice thing about is that if an XML message arrives in a message queue and you have a label, the integration process don't have to open the XML message itself. So it just can read the metadata, so that's very quick. So it just triggered, okay, is my message label the same that I defined in the integration process? It will pick up, and then it can process your message. So all the fields you need or defined can be in your XML. In case you use the CRM publisher, you will get all your fields from an entity, and it could also be containing the childs. So in case of order, you get your first will be the order header, and the next will be the order details. So that could contain the products, the prices, the amounts, and of course you have one or more product details. Now here you can see in a quick view a screenshot of the message queue process. So in the back you see the standard queues that Scribe will use. So if you can see it, you see Scribe in to your left side, retry in that message queue. So that's the three main message queues. So it's pretty simple. So if a message arrives, it arrives in a Scribe key. It could be that maybe a target system is not available. So then it will end up in the retry system. So you can define how many retries you will do before a message fails. So in case a message fails, then it will go to describe that message queue, or you could define another queue that you said, okay, that contains my failed messages. Now in case it goes, of course, we hope that it goes well. So then I have defined the Scribe succeeded queue, and then after a message is processed, okay, then it will arrive in the Scribe succeeded queue. And on the screenshot, you see the message ID. That's the metadata of the message. You see the label, so that's very important, the label. And you see the priority, so that's standard on 3. Recoverable is also very interesting. Of course, in case your system maybe go down or you have to reboot or whatever what happens, Also, the message is physically stored on your drive, on your hard disk. And when you boot it again, your message is still available. As the name indicates, of course, it's recoverable. So you can still, the process can pick it up again and continue processing it. Now in the very below, you will see the contents of the scrapping queue. So you see that one message has arrived. That's waiting to be processed. Now, of course, if you may be a little bit familiar, usually you have an account and you want to integrate it, and it could be that you need a lot of steps or more steps, especially actually also experience enough that it could be that before you can do accounts, you have to be checked that other entities are in place or that are so some data is required before. Now, of course, a good example is your quote. So here you see a screenshot of a business logic that you could have with a quote. It is a bit small, but the first step is to create a header. And basically the second step is to make details. So you could define it that of course you only want to have one header and hopefully many details, so then you can acquire the loop. So that if the same quote ID is used, it will skip step 1 and create a detail record. And other steps are, in this case, more complex, so it can handle more types of quotes. Okay, well, this was a screenshot of the mapping we already discussed. Yeah, of course, testing. So we designed it, we built it, and of course, testing. Now, in my experience, testing of integration takes a lot of time and effort. So basically, if you put it in a timeline, I would recommend that maybe 30 to 40% is for your testing and for your rework. Of course, we have two types of testing with the technical testing. So like an integration developer would do the technical testing. So when you start, of course, integration, you will test if you can connect all the sources, you can connect to your target systems. Later you can test your flow testing, so all the relations set right, your business logic, so you have to check all the mandatory fields are filled. It could be that you have some mandatory flows. So with the latest version of Twisten of 2003, you have to check if cost centers are available and some other fields that are mandatory. It could be that you only can, it's in the first insert that you are only allowed to set a few fields, and then you have to have the second step to update it. So that's all defined in your business logic. Now after you do after that created, you have of course the visual testing, so you will see if string values are correct, money values are of course interesting, so are the money values set in the right, and of course one of the challenges is the rounding. So I've seen and also dealt with a lot of situations where fixtures were rounding in the wrong way. So, and yeah, if you round it too up or down, that could make a very difference, especially with ERP. That's not always wanted. Now we have the functional testing. So in in a large project, it's mostly conducted with the test manager. So they test if the integration matches the functional requirements. They can do bulk testing, the more advanced testing, the real life example testings, and yeah, but mostly some rework after it. And we gonna hopefully we're gonna now see some live, and then I have to check if I have to share my screen. So we're gonna switch screens. Let me see if that works. Yep, one moment. Right. That's always nice if they use this the first time. One moment. Okay. Okay, that's better. I have to move this. And then we can, of course, log in. So this is my one of my VMware instances. And I have set up in the back CRM 2015 instance. So we see here already one record is available. I think there should be already more in. And of course, we have some sample data. So this is the CRM system, of course, and then we have here our very famous ERP system. So that's created with help of Stripe on a nice ERP system where we have addresses, customers, pick list, and products coming in. And here we have the integration tool. So I hope it's viewable, but we checked it before, but it should be okay. So this is your Stripe console. So that is your integration process. And we defined here the publisher. So we defined here one publisher for demonstration. So if I open it, that takes of course some time, and then we have the publisher. So basically what I defined here, you can open here for a moment, that I defined a publisher on account, the account entity, and I want, if a new account is inserted, then I wanted the publisher to create a new message. So the message label, account new, and what I also want to retrieve, that I want to retrieve the primary contact. So in the occasion that CRM user is creating an account, the publisher will be triggered and it will create a message now. So the publisher, so you see that I did already some work before. So you see here in the queue that the account new has arrived. So if you look at the message, so if you're familiar with CRM, you might recognize the fields. So we can see in the top line that it's around account. The operation, it was an insert, so that's fine because that's what we wanted. And we see the message label, account new. Now, next are all the fields that are standard available on your account entity. So you can see here that I just not customize it, but in case you have custom fields, it will also show your custom fields. Now totally in the back you see that there are also contacts, but is it for this account there were no contacts available, so the count is null. Now what I talked about, if the messages arrive here, then of course that's the publisher. So you see that I did also some sample data. So I think if I click this one, then you will see here that we have some sample data. Let me quickly scroll here. And you see here the name, fourth coffee sample. So if we come back here, then you should see also that for coffee sample is here. So this is part of your CRM system. Okay, so let me see, that was paused. Let us now take a step at once. I try to, if it's really working. So say for example, we define effects is 55, show 151. Of course, yeah, I'm still regular to do like this, save it, but just shouldn't be necessary. And we can go back to accounts and say we're gonna do a new test account. Say test account 01. Save this one. So at least this should trigger our events. And you see, we have a lot of new messages coming in already. And let's pick up the new one is this. So this was still one of the older ones I see. But at least you will see that after changes, also some other processes that were still running are creating new accounts. So that was still part of the sample data. So you will see that new accounts are arriving and accounts are updated. And integration process. So I did here a few. So you see here that this is in queue-based. So if I open this for a moment, then we can see here that we defined a queue-based integration for account new. We have an DTS, which has the mappings. So we can open it. It can take a while, of course, because my system is not that quick. But here it will be. So in here we have the XML message is based, so that's a message from an account type new that will coming in. You can see here all the fields available. So all the standard fields. At the right side, we have our ERP system, between quotes, of course, a very simple SQL table with the fields. And here we have a basic mapping. So here you can see, for example, that's S7. Let me check for a moment. That's account number goes to customer number. So this is a very straightforward mapping. So of course the lookup criteria, this is just an insert, so we don't have lookup criteria here. So in case you want to make it an update, you could define here, you set lookup link. And of course, that is also okay. If the customer number is already available, then it will update the record instead for just inserting it. And then we go further for the event settings. So we're still here in the integration process. So then we find here the message label, which is the interface looking if a message with this label is arriving, then this will be triggered. And it will process it in a new field. Now we have also a process for account new, and we have here have an example of a time-based. So time-based, that can be used for batch. So I defined here a batch process that can be run. And it will run Monday, Tuesday, to Friday at 12 a.m. And then it will be triggered. So that would be an example for a batch process. Let me see if this is active. It's not active. So this is an example, a real life example of how a very simple integration between your CRM system and the ERP system will work. Let's see if it's processing it yet. So this is how you could do it. So it contains a lot of testing. So we have seen the publishers, the integration process, the queue-based integration, and how you could do it. Let me switch back to the other screen, stop sharing, and to the demo. And then the next slide, if there are questions.
All right, thanks so much, Sandor. I'd like to just remind everyone that they can ask their questions through the Q&A block. To the right side of the slides, we'd love to hear what your integration questions are, if you're facing any specific challenges, no matter what the tool, and we can certainly take those questions now. All right. So far, I'm not really seeing any questions, Sandor. Kind of a quiet audience today, but
it's almost weekend.
I think we. Yeah. Do you have any contact information to share if people want to reach you after the event?
You can find me on LinkedIn. Of course, that's the best way. And I think my contact information also on the MS Dynamics site.
That's true. You have an author profile on our site. If you look back at the webcast listing, there's a contact link there, so certainly a good way to get in touch with you. All right. Well, Sandra, thanks so much for taking us through all this practical information today. We have recorded today's event. We'll be making it on demand quite soon. Yeah, so Sandra, thank you. Thank you to everyone in the audience for attending today and for your attention. With that, I will say have a good day, and that concludes the event.
Okay, thank you all.